All right, well, with no further ado, then I will hand it over to Tim Michels of Energy Resources Group. Thank you, Tim.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. Appreciate the support. Good questions at the end. Make this, since we are recording this, so it will make it a hopefully a more robust event if there are good questions. So moving forward, I have been inspired over the years by a number of other folk. One of them being Buckminster Fuller with the concept of thinking about the globe as an actual spaceship. And that's what we have to think of. This is a spaceship, and we're all involved in it. I appreciate the invite from the Climate Economy, and we're going to try to focus on energy efficiency and renewable energy, how it's a tool of economic development. And just there will be certain references in here today that have been tailored to Illinois, but almost everything I say will have equal applicability across the rest of the United States. So why do we want to focus on energy? Well, I've been doing this for 46 years now, chasing BTUs and watts, and it's a hidden gold mine that most people don't realize is there. 40% of the energy is used in buildings. We'll be talking about buildings and industry kinds of things that we can do. I don't deal with transportation. That's why it's grayed out. I let that be there for others. Energy efficiency has always been cost effective from day one, from the first day I started in '75 doing this. Renewable energy is already cost effective now in multiple different fashions. When the DOE projected in the late '70s that solar electric would be cost effective when it reaches 50 cents a peak watt, we translate that into today's dollars with a CPI increase of a factor of 6, and that would be equivalent to $3 a watt. So what we have been seeing is larger scale stuff installed at, I've even seen $1.75 a watt, and it's getting less. So we're definitely cost effective in solar production. Energy is a key to strong local economic development. And there are other, not specifically energy, but green jobs that abound that are sustainable and sustaining for jobs. And one of the major reasons to look at energy is risk management. We need to be a little bit more risk averse than we have been in the past. I think we kind of got that lesson taught to a bunch of people in Texas just a month ago or so. And besides the fuel cost impact issues, it's the problems with climate change and the damage that that's creating continuously with heightened weather events, natural disasters. And we need to protect the spaceship for the 7th generation forward. We can't be selfish. So the economics of energy efficiency, let's take a quick look at that. First of all, I'd like to point out that we have a commanding, controlling interest in this individually. You and I personally control 33% of the energy used in the United States. Indirectly, we also put a pull on the rest of the economy. We all want jobs, we all want services and products. So the other 2/3 of the economy, we're indirectly have a strong controlling capability there as well. So since that's what, I just want to wake people up and say, hey, everything you do has an impact. Realize it, own it, use it. Then we have the experience of having done this for a long time, and we have found that businesses are generally interested in a 3-year or less payback. I think a 6-year payback is quite reasonable for individuals. Where else can you get a guaranteed 16% rate of return on your investment? An investment that you've made in yourself? Okay. Our analysis suggests that in the United States, there are $3 trillion+ of economic opportunity to just invest in energy efficiency that on average will pay back in 4 years or less. That's worth 30 million jobs over a 10-year program, or 3 million jobs a year. If we were capable of dropping our energy consumption to these levels, the United States would reduce energy consumption 27%. And we're looking at the fact that that eliminates our effective trade balance with the rest of the world. We have net exports of 17%. So that puts us in a more strategic, stronger, more resilient position in the US. We're not dependent on foreign sources of energy. Now, the historic perspective, when you look back to 1950 and through the early 70s, energy use tracked economic development in the United States. When I first started this in the 70s, just after the 73 oil embargoes, everybody was saying, oh, well, we have to have more energy. And that's when we kept talking about the peak oil problem, that we were going to peak oil and there wouldn't be enough available. And we just kept arguing or trying to say, shout from the sidelines that, well, the only reason there's a correlation is that we're happy to continue to waste energy in the fashion to which we've become accustomed. So the oil embargo slapped us up the side of the head, and we started looking at what were really very cost-effective opportunities to reduce our consumption. And you see that energy use, Carter era, started dropping, went down, but our economy kept growing. And as we look at this over time, we find that we've only grown our energy consumption about 33% since the 70s, and we've increased our domestic economy over 200%. So if we look at the fact that everything we've been looking at has at least a 4-year payback or less that we've been able to implement in all of our ventures over the last 40 some odd years, that would take us from where we're at today, looking at just the energy usage. You see that we've been bouncing around 100 quads annually for the last 2 decades. So we've locked it in. You could see that dip in 2008 when the economy dropped. Then it took us a while to recover, and then we stopped paying attention to it, and we started going up again with lack of emphasis on where we should be going. Now, what we really think should be happening, and that this would be primarily for governmental, residential, and institutional returns on investment. If you can get yourself a 12% return on investment, which is an 8-year or less payback, you know, it's hard to find a guaranteed rate of return that's going to be that good and that continuous. And it looks like we woke up with some recent announcements that this is soon to be the USA goal for 2030, effectively cutting our energy consumption 50%, which will, you know, surprisingly give everybody a very good rate of return on investment. All right, I've already said that. The economics of renewables. As I said, back in the 70s, we were waiting for things to get cost effective. They have become cost effective. When we look at what we classify as renewables, we're going to look at geothermal. We're not going to dive into it. I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. Geothermal is an opportunity to actually tap the heat at in the Earth's mantle and crust. and actually generate all the power we need right from that. This to me is a very opportune industry once we start moving away from our carbon-based fuels like oil and natural gas. We have in that industry developed tremendous drilling technology and capability. We should harness that to harvest for us what is supposed to be, according to the EIA, our least expensive energy cost. There's wind, there's solar, there's animal waste and all waste in general. There's so much waste that we're throwing away. It's creating environmental problems for us, and all of it has got built into it a major solution, and that is produce our energy and stop polluting the planet. There's biomass and there's hydro. Those are what we would classify as reasonably good. We can get into all kinds of ocean currents and tidal forces and things like that, but these are the ones that I believe are going to be very cost effective in the future. When you look at it, biomass is 43% of our renewable energy budget. The United States produces already 11% of its energy from renewables. And then there's wind that's a very good source. Then there's hydroelectric. Notice these are in reverse order. You know, the biomass is at 43%, wind is 24%, hydro is 22%, solar is 9%, geothermal is 2%, and that's as of 2019. There's been, you know, big jumps in all of this since then as well. Now, what I'm going to show you is what the government had projected was going to be the economic forecast for a variety of renewable energies. And they put this report out in 2015, so they were basing it on 2013, 2014 data. They projected what the levelized cost of electricity would be with new generation that would be available by 2020. Well, when you look at this and you look at levelized cost of coal, cost of energy, it is, you know, baseline by coal being 100%, and then it projects the cost, and it showed us that renewable energies that were already less expensive were in that time frame. Hydro was less expensive, and then wind, and they were projecting geothermal at 50% of the cost of electricity compared to coal. When you look at this, some of the issues with renewable energy is whether or not it's dispatchable. Can it meet the needs of a utility grid all the time? And two of these, you know, geothermal and biomass, in my mind, are considerably dispatchable. They can be used to make up, you know, shortages in solar and wind when those are dynamic. One of the things that needs to be part of this conversation, however, is storage. That's what's going to be part of the bridge that makes all of this work for us. And with respect to storage, we want to consider things like flywheels, batteries, and fuel cells. Flywheels, I think, are going to be a dominant opportunity. You're not dealing with rare earth metals and environmental destruction, trying to extract those things. Flywheels are, you know, are going to be built in the future out of carbon. Very, very sustainable, and they don't have to be recycled. They have indefinite life. They can be repaired continuously. Fuel cells, I'm sorry?
Sorry to interrupt. Could you explain really quick what a flywheel, what we're talking about there?
A flywheel is a device that has mass, and it is brought to a rotational velocity. You put energy into it, and then with the fact that we can now do what we're doing with some chillers, we're levitating these devices with electromagnetic fields. So there's very little frictional resistance that will slow them down. And they, on microseconds, can either be absorbing energy or pushing energy out. So they have physics, I think, that is superior to things like batteries. They also have the environmental issues that I think are superior to batteries. And again, I like fuel cells because they're an opportunity. Again, they have times of life that they will burn out in terms of getting, toxins that will plug up their membranes where they're moving the energy around. But you can store, if you can hydrolyze water with excess energy, hydrogen from wind or solar, you can store that oxygen and the hydrogen, and you can push it back through a fuel cell and make electricity. So I think that's a very clean approach to the future, and that would help us baseload excess energies that we can produce, but it's hard to store things in electric batteries because there's just so much current density that they can absorb. But when you can have very large tanks of compressed natural gas and oxygen just sitting there, you can recover it, and you just had the inefficiencies of hydrolyzing the water and then the small energy inefficiencies. Well, fuel cells right now are probably in the 60% reconversion range. So that would work better than a power plant. If you burn the hydrogen in a power plant, for instance, you might be able to get a 30 to 40% yield of electricity back out of it. So it's a great way to recover energy that is stored with a high output. So Deloitte, one of the 4 major accounting firms in the United States, was doing comparable research on what was happening when the DOE, it was taking 13 and 14 data and making projections or predictions from the 15 research that they did. It was being paralleled apparently by the private sector, and Deloitte was finding that energy was being built out across the globe, and it was running such that conventional fuels were costing between, I'd say $42 and $78 per megawatt hour produced. Solar was in a very narrow band between the 40s and the high 50s, and wind was all the way down to the 30s and up to 60. So if we plot, these were the projected 20-year target, 2020-year targets that the DOE had. So again, it was a very conservative approach, and we now see that the reality is such that we can use wind and solar at much less cost to produce electricity. Again, it's still not dispatchable, but we've got to solve that problem, but it's got great promise for us in the future. I would suggest that, we stop building conventional power plants. Now, there are a couple of other renewable opportunities that I think get overlooked in this process. There's what I would call reused or recycled energy that's used in primarily industrial settings for combined heat and power. So if you've got a large thermal demand, you can first make electricity and then use the waste heat off of those turbines and or generators to provide the thermal energy that you need. So this is a big opportunity in the United States right now. And then all of our organic waste, we can, this is, for instance, the animals that we raise, that we eat, produce 10 times the fecal matter that we as human beings produce. So we're really reaching out and polluting a lot of the environment just so that we could eat meat. Well, we could take that waste stream and convert it into energy, and food waste, other organic waste, these could make renewable natural gas, which again, I guess we can continue to burn it because it's renewable, but it's still a conventional technology, and we are trying to find other things that we can do so that we're not dependent on the conventional petroleum-based fuels that we're looking at.
Hey, Tim?
Sir.
Is there any future at all for nuclear energy?
I'm going to let other folks sort that one out. The reason I don't like it is simply, I start first always with the economics. It's extremely expensive to build nuclear power plants. And then to deal with the issues of, you know, closing them down and disposing of the waste. I think it's a Faustian bargain. I would prefer to leave my nuclear-based energy production at a safe distance of 93 million miles away on the sun.
What about carbon capture for coal or natural gas plants?
Again, you're adding cost to, well, if we go back to the slides, let's go back. You're seeing here that the cost of coal right now is generally across the United States 9.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay? So if I'm looking at geothermal up here at 4.8 cents a kilowatt hour, what do you think I should be doing from an economic standpoint? And if I do the carbon capture off of the coal plant, I am sitting here adding additional costs to this commodity that was going to further price it out of the market. Now, I'm all for carbon capture. I think if we could build, you know, industrial scale greenhouses around power plants, we could use the waste heat off of the power plant through the stack gases to keep those heated in the winter, and also enrich the CO2 environment in those greenhouses so that we have much higher biomass production. And then those then become renewable sources of energy.
Tim, I would just add that the carbon is already captured in coal. We just need to stop digging it up.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do with biochar, is reintroduce it into the soils to make the soils better. So cool. I'm sorry, Ken, did you have a further?
No, you addressed it. Thank you.
Okay. So let's look at how we can move some of these into solutions. Okay. How would we start? What would we do? Well, one of the things that I find that has been a barrier is people are not consciously really thinking about energy opportunities as a true investment. We give it short shrift. Oh, it's tree hugging. Oh, we need to do it because we've got to save the planet. No, you just need to save money. So we want to develop energy investment policies, and people really want to focus on this and make it happen. And then the second step is to develop a master plan of attack. And then once you've got the plan, you need to find the money. Okay, so going forward, what happened here? How did that happen? Oh, okay, I'm just not seeing my screen. So let's look at this. Let's codify your investment policy. Go through the list of all the things that you want it to do. What do you want your rates of return to be? What are the standards you're going to be having to achieve and use to guide your investment process? Is it going to be strictly based on the energy savings, or does it include other, not peripheral, but often ignored energy benefits, energy improvement benefits? Is it going to include the maintenance, the life cycle costs? Generally, when you put better equipment in, you have longer life cycles and lower maintenance. And do you want to put a value on carbon, or has somebody else in society put a value on carbon for you? There are tax benefits for making these investments. There are utility incentives and rebates, and calculate the inflation costs that you're expecting of energy over time. But you need to really establish clear timeframes for your financial evaluation. We often like to suggest use a net present value that's positive over 7 years, and use that as your criteria. We think those are not unreasonable returns on investment. And then clear targets. We want to do this by a certain date. I've had the opportunity to establish energy policies for a variety of different institutions. One thing I hadn't done because I was naive, thought they were really interested in this. We didn't set criteria up that were going to be management required to reach. Okay, and a sample policy, let's invest in efficiency up to an 8-year payback, and let's invest in renewables so that we're in a 12-year or less payback time frame. I'd like to stop the investment in efficiency at a reasonably earlier time frame than renewables, because as you see, renewables are accelerating faster than we believe they can in terms of being cost effective. Recent studies we've done for others, if you're on the right rate structures for electricity in the St. Louis area, solar is roughly a 10-year payback for individuals that have at least a personal tax appetite for what you can get back from the federal government. So then we like to also recommend that you adopt the International Energy Conservation Code. And since most of these codes are based on standards like ASHRAE 90.1, which is based on a consensus process, it leaves a lot of money on the table. We would recommend that anything that you do relative to these standards, your target should be 30% less than that in terms of energy consumption. If it's allowed, if you can get a permit to build it, you should be doing it at 30% less energy than the permit allows. It's simply because it is not consistent with good economics. It's only a consensus process where the industry says, yes, you can gore my cow only this far. Okay. I like to also make sure that you include a 20-year life cycle economic analysis in this process. And if it's for existing buildings, not new construction, I would just say start the process by establishing a target of let's reduce it 30% over the next 3 years, and then repeat. But you keep compressing a 30% reduction over a rolling 3-year period. And if you do that for 7 years, you'll probably be in just about the right spot. And then you want to make sure they get all the work commissioned. And then you measure your results, you verify you got the savings, and then you educate your stakeholders. But give it teeth. Make sure that it's calculated into the performance evaluations of management. Okay, step 2, develop a master plan of attack. Well, the first thing we want to do is bring energy efficiencies to buildings and industrial processes. Okay, the buildings themselves use 40%, and the industrial processes are, I forgot. Somebody else can tell me that later, or we can go back to the old slides and look at that. But anyway, the energy efficiency is well understood. It's an easy, low-hanging fruit kind of market, and there's a large amount of it waiting there to happen. And it stimulates and sustains significant jobs when you go after it, both professionals like ourselves, the construction folk, and even the financial industries, because somebody's going to be doing that investment. And if we're going to develop local renewable industries, we look at the direct renewable energy sources. Those are wind and solar. And then the indirect are things like ground source heat pumps, wastewater to methane, or waste systems to methane, landfill gas recovery, and then all the other waste streams that come out of the community. Over 50% of the materials that are going into the landfill are organic based, at least, probably more than that, probably closer to 70, but I know that 50% of it at least is compostable. Things like plastic that's being thrown away is not necessarily compostable, so that adds maybe another 20%. If you put that through a waste stream pyrolytic gasification process, we're making all kinds of energy. So those are just technologies that are available to industry. Industry does it, but there's no reason why we can't be doing that at the community level with municipal solid waste. And then from all of these processes above, there may be co-products. I mean, we make excess heat that will suffice to provide heat energy for industry, electrical energy for industry, and then we can recover that heat and use it again. And then we're making compressed natural gas in the process. And in getting there, getting through this second phase of coming up with you know, the opportunities and how we're going to do it, we need to employ an integrative design process. We too often ignore, you know, people that have got input to this process that have very, very good thoughts. I mean, we need the widest perspectives we can generate. Broad points of view are critical for real problem solving. We're going to leave things out. Everyone's concepts are valid and valuable, and especially if we do it in an integrative fashion. We want to encourage disruptive thinking. You know, we can't do it the same way it's always been done. How well has that worked? We need to eliminate the silo approach, break down the barriers. You know, some of what we see is, you know, towns and cities and counties and state and the federal government don't collaborate well. Let's start breaking down these barriers. There's also the U.S. departments. You know, some of them have got overlapping programs. You know, there's no reason to have that duplication if we could get it all organized. You know, EPA does one thing, USDA does another, DOE, DHUD. Not that we shouldn't have these departments, but maybe we should figure out how to make them more integrative and reinforcing the processes. And then the big one that always bites us is, oh, well, first cost is too high. We can't do it. Well, you need to look at all the costs and follow the example of nature. There's no such thing as waste. Outputs from one system are necessary inputs to another. But let's at least ban silo thinking as we go down the road. So let's look quickly at, since we're in Southern Illinois and there's lots of biomass and things like that, and it's an ag-based economy, I pulled this out of some work we've done in the past. If we have hog, poultry, and beef, and we've got CAFO waste, we can amend that with woody biomass, crop residues, spoilage, food waste, waste paper. We can go into methane digesters. We can make biogas. We can use that to produce CHP. So CHP is sending the thermal energy so it can go back to systems that can use it. The electricity goes to the grid. We can even do secondary power production and do more electricity off of this thermal energy that's captured. We end up with the co-products, nutrient-rich materials coming out of the methane digesters. We can send that to we can send some of this nutrient materials into the hydroponics to grow plants. We can do algae production with it. We can do lipids and bio oils recovery from the algae. All of this can go into aquaculture, and all of these things can feed back to where the waste streams from all of these go back into the process. And then we've got products that go to market. I think we can build whole economies around this and keep it local. Why are we still fishing the North Sea for, you know, fish? We can grow all the fish locally, sustainably, without, you know, destroying the oceans.
Tim, can I ask something about that diagram?
Okay.
So when we're talking about this kind of a model, what's the local area we need? How are we going to figure out how to do this with?
Well, I'd suggest that if you were to work with a local pig farmer, and you could, you know, be bringing, you know, they're bringing in waste they're bringing in materials to feed the hogs. We can also bring the stover in from the field that raised the corn and the cob, and we can grind that up and we can put it into a methane digester that doesn't have to be that big, that can sit right on the farm with the hogs.
So we're looking at what we have locally first, basically.
Yes, of course. We want to work locally. Why do I want to ship this anywhere?
And maybe looking at what products we want to produce.
Well, you can trend it different directions depending on what you want. It has a lot to do with what other residues you put in here that you're going to digest, as to what your nutrients and your sludge will be coming out the other side. But those are things that you can develop other industries off of and around on the same site if you want. We've tried to develop models for these things, and so done a lot of grant proposals that haven't been funded.
So we just got to make people aware of these models mainly, so we can.
Well, I mean, we just get started. I mean, it's still, if you put up one anaerobic digester on the one pig farm, then things will evolve from that. I think it's just like nature. We can help this evolve.
Just let it grow organically.
Yes. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Let it grow organically.
Awesome.
But
Thank
we
you.
want to get into the idea. I mean, a lot of the country, neighborhoods and even rural areas are, what we call food deserts. We need to reverse that. And I'll show you some options for how we can do that in a bit. But I'm just using this as, let's find the money. Now let's look at this as something that occurs as a pebble dropping into a pond, and it's going to evolve over time as the ripples go out. The time and the scope of what you can do grows. And by that, I mean, you first train local talent to perform energy audits or things like that. We do energy audits for homes and businesses. We hire local companies and businesses to implement the audits. And we're implementing things like lighting, repairs, insulation, new windows, new HVAC. We start and sustain businesses to deliver the needed efficiency equipment and services. Now we want to make sure we're also trying to do the equipment locally as we can. And then we expand the base of skills and services offered. It just keeps going. And then we take it to a community scale. And now, how would we look at this? Let's look at, opportunities with USDA. Just this one set of federal programs. You got home ownership, home repair loans and grants, rural rental housing loans, housing revitalization, self-help, P&A loans and grants, housing preservation, business and industry guaranteed loans, rural business development grants, intermediary relending programs that communities, cities and counties can get involved with. Again, rural economic development loans and grants, rural energy for America program, and the community program loans and grants. I mean, there's just tons of opportunity out there, and all of these have some interaction, not with necessarily every one of the things that we just suggested doing, and more that weren't listed because space is not available. But let's leverage these things that are there. I don't know why. I guess I missed this one. I forgot to do that one. Okay. And then you've got a specialist right there in Marion, Illinois, that wants to try to do all of this with you. His name is Michael McKee. There's his phone number and his address. Okay. Now, if that's just looking for efficiency, what can we do with renewable energy? Let's just look at the biomethane example we just presented. Again, time scope. Let's help businesses build, own, and operate solar and wind farms. Help businesses build, own anaerobic digesters and compressed natural gas systems. Build their own and operate cogen systems. Co-product recovery systems, marketing. Reach out to the distressed communities, then deliver economic, environmental, and energy justice opportunities there. And then again, let's take it to the community scale. Again, these are specific programs within USDA which would deal with these. Okay, again, a matrix, an opportunity. So in my humble opinion, there's plenty of opportunities that can be leveraged. We just have to get adept at doing so. Again, Michael McKee knows all about this. He'll help you. So find the money. What's the example? Well, let's just take a simple thing like building a home that's at least net zero already, if not net zero. You compare the costs of mortgage, energy, maintenance, and other life cycle costs on the equipment. Plus you throw in things like insurance costs. It costs, if you build a very good house, it's going to have lower insurance rates typically. And for me, it's all a matter of the economics. If it makes money, it makes sense. And we can generally establish any of these things we've been talking about so that it's cash flow positive from day one. When you look at this, this was a home that we built in Jefferson County. It was an insulated concrete form home. We compared it to the price of the conventional frame home. And we installed a ground source heat pump instead of an air source heat pump. And those were the basic improvements that we did. And you can see that the cost starts off for this home being, blue being the Kimswick home, slightly more expensive on an annual basis. And then somewhere around the 15th year, it crosses over and it's less expensive. It was not less expensive. Actually, your annual energy costs, your annual total costs are actually less, but your mortgage is buffering you from that because you have a higher mortgage. So the mortgage was slightly higher on a monthly basis, and the difference though with the energy improvements and the energy savings over time, it paid it back so that in 15 years you were net positive, and by the end of the 30-year loan you were $16,000 ahead. So I'm just saying, the money can be there if you can afford a slightly higher mortgage payment or stretch out the terms a little bit longer. You can definitely do everything we suggest you can do in a conventional mortgage. Okay, let's sweeten the pie. Outside influences. Again, utility incentives and rebates. And even in the co-ops, they have opportunities for us. Monroe County Co-op has audits and rebate options. And then there's efficiency evaluation tools for home and business with the Southern Illinois Electric Co-op. The Small Business Administration has as many or better programs for small businesses, not the homes, not the residences, but the businesses as we presented with the USDA stuff. Then there are federal tax credits and tax deductions, especially with the new laws that accelerate your depreciation into year one. It becomes a quicker payback for you. So if we're finding the money for renewable energy, USDA is prominent here because of their specific mandate to support rural economic development for Southern Illinois. EPA and DOE have opportunities as well, and the Small Business Administration. There's just lots of ways to get this to happen. Capital is not an issue. Just want to state that. We've got third-party financing opportunities chasing it everywhere. You can always make a deal where you're in positive cash flow from day one. And we've talked about these ad nauseum now. Oh, one thing to mention is that in the not too distant future, we'll be seeing more benefits out of selling carbon credits to the market. So that's something to look forward to. So, working at scale. This is a diagram, a model that we've used in the past. Actually, we developed this in 1981 for a community that we were looking at. But your primary requirement to make this work is to analyze your site for what you've got as sources of energy potential. And that includes everything on the left, all your site-based sources, sewage, biomass, trash garbage, geothermal, the real geothermal, not ground source. They call ground source heat pumps geothermal, and it's not. We even did a project where it looked cost effective to build a resort out in Colorado by storing the snow in the wintertime that they had to plow off the road so that they could generate all the cooling needed in the summer. So solar and wind, we've seen a lot of that now. You go through interconversion processes here in this middle phase. You know, when you've got a variety of fuel opportunities, fuel inputs or energy source inputs, and then this will cycle back to help support other things and cycle forward to meet the loads that you're after. So that's what we would like to see at a community scale. When we did this analysis in '81, our model was a community of 168 dwelling units. We had done, just prior to this, a renovation of a duplex in University City with a small grant from the Department of Energy. We found that we could cost effectively reduce the heating energy required for that home with a 9-year payback. We reduced it 70%. And in the 70s, we weren't trying to do electric with solar at that point in time. But conservation, we remodeled to reduce the energy use. We saved 50% through just making it more energy efficient. And with the passive solar, it cut another 20% off of the energy budget. So if we use that as a model and we applied it to the dwelling units in this community, then we looked at sewage, biomass, trash, and garbage. And then the estimated return on investment at that point in time was a 20 to 30-year payback, which is not unreasonable at a community scale. Today, it is a whole lot more cost effective to do this. So again, waste to energy. We shouldn't be landfilling our waste. I think it's in Sweden, they don't allow you to landfill garbage. So the biomass and the yard waste is all recycled. It makes heat. Okay? You can't landfill that waste. In the United States, we have 75 of these waste to energy plants that are relatively large, but we should be doing the smaller and more modular approach that they've got in Sweden so that it can happen easily everywhere. And then beside this, you can still do the anaerobic digesting and the renewable natural gas rather than just burn stuff. You can begin to produce the feedstock for replacing natural gas for producing plastic. You know, not that we want to use the plastic as our thing in the future, but if we're going to get rid of pumping oil and natural gas out of the ground, we can then use these feedstocks for the chemical needs that we're going to have in the future. So we can stretch it that far into the future. So let's just look at what we've got as, well, you know, even beyond energy, all of this supports jobs. Here's just a small list of the energy jobs that can be created just around residential construction. We can do compressed earth and block homes, insulated concrete homes, building energy efficiency, ground source heat pumps, solar PV, solar thermal. Although I have never seen solar thermal be cost effective except as in the passive kind of device that is just a tank on the roof that the sun shines on. So for domestic hot water. So wind, biomass, methane, all of these things get down to storage. Again, salvage, we've got so much waste in this country. You know, the enormous number of jobs that are sustainable and sustaining and environmentally healing can come out of this process as we begin to shuffle the deck and integrate the things that we can do. Go green on the farming. Let's do organic. Let's do it in, you know, vertical greenhouses if we need to. Aquaculture. beekeeping, hydroponics. Yeah, beekeeping would be really good because, you know, crops are at risk with the death of bee crops, you know, bee dying. So again, just a lot of opportunities. I don't want to hammer on them too long. But again, the concept here is we got to be working as communities. Partnering is pivotal to success. You know, there are folks out there that are trying to develop incubator services to provide the training, skills, and, you know, just the ability to make the loan applications to the USDA, EPA, and SBA. The financing services are out there. A lot of communities and not-for-profits would benefit more if there was a ready stable of people that would split the difference with them on the tax benefits that are available. Always helps. And then again, construction skills, maintenance and operating skills, and plant production skills. All right. Other green opportunities. Well, these are supposed to all pop up at once, weren't they? Anyway, they didn't. So anyway, just looking at, you know, vertical greenhouse work, you know, that's stuff that I think would happen. We developed plans for doing aquaculture on a native reservation tribe back in the 1990s. They were moving forward to getting it funded, and then unfortunately the tribal leadership was elected out that was working on that, and the other guys kicked it to the curb. So, you know, lots of stuff happens. But biochar and composting, we really have to think about sustaining our ag base by restoring it. And these will help. These are means and methods to make sure that we can continuously count on the ag productivity that we're famous for here in the United States. But we have to keep the soils healthy. We got to keep reinvesting. And that's one of the things that biochar can do, along with compost. And a lot of the organic matter out there is ready, willing, and able to be converted into biochar and compost. We also need to understand that the market for biochar is much, much greater than just that for restoring soils too. And it's a high value commodity. It's this kind of material that probably goes into some of the carbon fiber production that's going to be building the storage flywheels in the future. So when we look at where we're at today, we've got about 11% of the world's energy is from renewable. Okay? And the Biden administration target for 2030 is 50%. And that's only going to happen if we truly realize that energy efficiency is our cheapest renewable energy. Those megawatts that we never need again and again and again. Okay, but what we really need to be doing is looking into the future and become restorative, not just net zero. So again, the question was asked earlier, what about carbon capture? We're still going to have to do carbon capture to save the planet. We're going to have to figure out ways to do that. There are means and methods now that they're using that to create materials suitable for generating concrete. In other words, you can capture the carbon and you can turn it into carbonates. Everything we touch or use needs to go back to nature at least as good or better than we took it from nature. We need to be working for sustainability so that we're honoring the 7th generation after us. Again, community. There are many, many partners. Join the team. Reap the rewards. After all of us are part of the crew. And we have to think that way.